Hi, this is Cal Sipkowski for AP Gov Review, and in Unit 4, we'll be looking at Congress as well as the major institutions of government. So let's focus first on Congress. This is a very hefty chapter, and before we really get into the nitty-gritty, let's start with an overview. So if you recall that the Founding Fathers intended Congress to be the central policy-making body, in the idea that it would be most directly in touch with the people. It was the branch that was supposed to be the most contact through specifically the House of Representatives at the time. And keep in mind, too, that when the framers of the Constitution are thinking about the structure, they want to have the power in the hands of many. Remember that they had just gotten out of a bad relationship with Great Britain, which the American Revolutionary War was fought over. So it makes sense that they're going to put more power in the hands of many, and the House of Representatives at this time, which would comprise of Congress, would be most responsible for this. And of course, Madison was saying that this would be the most powerful branch in the Federalist Papers, number 51, as you looked at in Unit 1. And again, that was part of how you would check against a monarchical government. Now, what is interesting today is, first, it is debatable as to whether Congress is the most powerful branch. And number two, approval ratings are at historic lows for Congress. They always really have been in the past decade. A lot of people not really looking so favorably on Congress. But at the end of the day, they are the direct link between the people and policy. Remember, this specific chart is really what AP Gov is all about. You start with interest, problems, concerns, and they are relayed through specifically linkage institutions. In this case, connecting with Congress would be through the elections, and that's how you frame something on a policy agenda. Now, to get it into policy, this is where the legislature is going to come about, and you're going to be very much responsible for knowing what Congress does. It is a central institution. It's something that's heavily tested on the AP Gov exam. So why would you want to become a congressperson? Well, the perks of the job include power. You can legislate. You have a salary of $174,000. You get own office space. You also get travel allowances and franking privileges, which allow you to basically mail your constituents of things that you're doing. It's almost like free advertising. However, at the end of the day, it does require long hours, a good amount of time from family, especially if you are representing a state or specifically a district that is much farther away, such as Hawaii or California. It does not allow you to go home on the weekend, so that can be very difficult on a congressperson with a family. Now, ultimately, how does a congressperson behave? Well, there are three main views that a congressperson would have. First, the constituents' views, right? You want to keep in touch with voters, and you do this by sending mail. You would read mail, also keep in touch with local leaders within your district, also frequent your particular district as well. However, the biggest predictor is party. The party line as to how the political party stands on that particular issue is again the biggest predictor of how a congressperson will vote, as you see on this chart over here, about 65% of the time as of 2012. And then personal views can also impact that, as especially when it comes to views that might have a moral decision, whether that be about gay marriage, whether that be about abortion or some other social issue. You can see personal views coming about that way as well. Now, how Congress is organized is a concept that you should definitely be aware of. It should have come up in AP US history if you took that, but bicameralism. And that is where you're going to have a Congress with two houses, that being, of course, the House of Representatives and, of course, being the Senate. Now, the House is composed of 435 members. They serve for 2-year terms, and the idea being that they have to be the most responsive to the people, so that's why they're elected every 2 years. In addition, do know that it does initiate all revenue bills. Only revenue bills, things with taxation, can only start in the House of Representatives. Not the Senate, not the executive branch, right? That the executive branch has nothing to do with legislation or taxation. So definitely know that the House of Representatives controls all budget matters, initiating with that. They also have a House Rules Committee. We'll be getting into that a little bit probably in the next video, but it is the most powerful committee within the House, which you will definitely need to know. It almost always appears in some form or another on the AP Gov exam. They do have limited debates, meaning that you cannot filibuster, and members are determined by population, right? Some states have more population, and as a result, they're going to have more Representatives as opposed to the Senate. And of course, in the Senate, you have 100 members serving 6-year terms in office. 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election every 2 years. And again, the Senate really has more stability. That was the idea, whereas the House really not so much. And the Senate was seen as sort of giving the advice and consent, especially on more affairs dealing with foreign policy. And again, they do have what's called a filibuster, which allows for unlimited debates to delay a vote from happening. However, in the House, that of course does not occur. Now, really, the House, which was supposed to be most responsive to the people, would be sort of cooled off by the Senate. The idea that if the House got it too out of control, that the Senate would cool off the masses in the House of Representatives. Also be aware that really up until the 17th Amendment, senators were elected by the members of the state legislature. Basically, it was known as the Millionaires Club, as you see in this political cartoon, that the Senate, again, at this point was not all that democratic, but there was the belief that, hey, the local people are voting for their members of the state legislature, and then in turn, they're going to vote for who they want in the Senate. But at this point, prior to the 17th Amendment, you do have them being appointed by the state legislature. So again, they were not all that responsive to the people. Now, when we look at congressional leadership, specifically in the House of Representatives, you have the Speaker of the House, the most powerful person, controls the legislation, controls the agenda in the House. Very big role there. Also has a major role in committee assignments, and of course some committees, as you'll find out later, do have much more of significance, have much more influence, and are a little bit more important. A Speaker of the House is also going to be assisted by the Majority Leader, who is basically the stepping stone to the Speaker position, and you basically also have the whips, who are the go-betweens, and metaphorically whips the votes. And in the House, it tends to be more structured, you have more rules, and actually, you do see more party loyalty being a lot stronger in the House as opposed to the Senate. Now, looking at the Senate, it is formally led by the Vice President. However, the Vice President plays a very limited role, basically most of the time not a role at all, in only casting a vote in the event of a tie. So most of the time you have a President pro tempore, which is a ceremonial position in which the senior member of the political party in control will preside over the Senate. But really the main power in the Senate belongs to the Majority Leader, so the political party with the most party members in the Senate will elect the Majority Leader, and that will determine the Senate agenda, similar to the Speaker of the House in the House of Representatives. And of course, just like in the House, in the Senate, you have the Majority Leader is assisted by the whips. They are the go-betweens between the members and the leadership. And of course, they do have to work with the Minority Leader of the other party. And you tend to see more compromise in the Senate as opposed to the House. It makes a little bit of sense because you're working with only 100 people compared to 435 members in the House. So that certainly helps a lot. Now, again, as we've seen here, as I just went over, in terms of some key differences, membership, definitely different term of office. Do be aware that the Senate does have a much larger constituency most of the time, with the exception, for example, let's say New Hampshire, which only has one congressperson to 2 senators. But if you're in the state of California, right, you only have 2 senators, yet you have many more representatives. So in terms of compromise, as we said earlier, that can be much easier in the Senate compared to the House. In terms of prestige, it is more prestigious to be in the Senate as opposed to the House, but still, nevertheless, you do see some major differences amongst others. Now, in particular, the Speaker of the House is important in terms of recognizing members who wish to speak on the floor. The Speaker of the House is also important in ruling on questions of parliamentary procedure, as it can be very intricate. Along with that, appointing members to select and conference committees. Committees do play a major role in the legislative process, as you'll see in other videos. Directing business on the floor, political and behind-the-scenes influence, especially if it is a very important piece of legislation that the Speaker of the House wants. Also appointing parties, legislative leaders, and substantial control over which bills get assigned to which committees. Again, if you want a bill to die, you can easily do so, or vice versa. And then the minority whips within the House are, again, the go-betweens for the members and the leadership. Again, metaphorically whipping up the vote. They inform members of an important bill that will come up for a vote. They do nose counts for leadership, so if they want to see if a bill has a good chance of passing, this is a good way for whips to become useful. And of course, pressuring members to support the leadership, especially when it needs those votes. Now, what's really important is to know the fundamental powers of Congress. Of course, the powers to collect taxes, borrow money, regulate commerce, and you've seen Congress has really expanded upon its reach since its formation following the Constitutional Convention. Also, they have the only power out of all three branches to declare war. Really, the only last declared official war was actually World War II, interestingly enough. They can, of course, raise and support an army and navy, amongst other things, but also know that all legislation begins with Congress, no other branch. So definitely be aware of that. Other powers that are exclusive powers. When we talk about exclusive powers, these are only powers for the one specific house of Congress. So for the House of Representatives, all revenue bills must originate from the House of Representatives. No doubt about it. You definitely need to know that. And for impeachment to begin, whether that's for the president, the vice president, other civil officers to the House, it has to begin in the House of Representatives. Now, exclusive powers only for the Senate. The House has no role in anything whatsoever. Presidential appointments, remember, do have to be confirmed by the Senate, so that deals with any cabinet. So if we're looking at an appointment to the Secretary of Commerce or Secretary of Defense, that would have to be approved by the Senate. And again, remember, they give their advice and consent. Also, ambassadors, federal judges, all have to be confirmed by the Senate. And then treaties must also be approved by the Senate. So if a president is going to negotiate a treaty, that's all great. However, for it to be ratified, it must be approved by the Senate. Now, a lot of these powers have actually, over time, have basically evolved. So really the biggest thing that's really ever expanded the power of Congress was the Elastie Clause, which came out of the McCulloch v. Maryland case, a hallmark case you should, again, be very well aware of, which allowed Congress to make all laws necessary and proper. Well, that's very vague. What is necessary? What is proper? That's a lot of power. Now, Congress, together, again, with the House and the Senate, has oversight of the budget, reviews, restricts the budgets prepared by the president. So Congress must first authorize the bill, stating the maximum amount of money, and then also appropriate, given the actual amount of money for that fiscal year. And then also they lead investigation, what is known as legislative oversight. So if there are issues that warrant study or wrongdoing, they will investigate it. They conduct this through committee hearings, and they can force people to testify. So legislative oversight is a big power that Congress has. All right, let's end with a review question. The Constitution states that all revenue bills must originate in, and if you said Congress, you would be incorrect. You would only be partially correct. Really, the best answer and the only answer is the U.S. House of Representatives. And if you got that, kudos to you.